Listen, I know it's distracting, but I just got back from the gym and I'm just excited. I want to talk about a deck, so you're just going to have to deal with this for the remainder of this video, and you better not ask for more of it because we're talking about Karametra today. So Karametra is actually one of the commanders that I first ever built. So when I got into the game, I picked up, as some of you may already know, an Is It Go deck from the Baldur's Gate set for Krog or whatever its name is. And the commander bug bit me. Shortly thereafter, I decided I wanted to build my own thing, and I decided that I wanted to go in a more value-based format. So I went with Selesnya because I liked green. My friend was playing green, so I wanted to go with something that looked cool. And Karametra, to be fair, this art, I'll put it up on screen now, it looks sick. I love this artwork. Was it Eric Deschamps? Is just incredible, apparently, based on this. And it inspired me to build this commander. And the ability that goes along with Karametra is just so good that I felt like I knew exactly how I was going to build it. And that was my fatal error right there. You see, I didn't actually have a good understanding as to how I was going to build this commander. I just sort of wung it. I went on EDH Rec because I had just found the site and I was not really excited. I wasn't really ready to dive into the deck building process with the idea of just a bunch of elves and Sakura Tribe Elder and all that type of stuff, because what I figured was going to work was big mana spells. So I actually took this deck and I put a bunch of just regular ramp in there in the form of like Kodama's Reach and Cultivate and all that kind of stuff. And I decided to throw the Eldrazi Titans in there. And I spent way too much money on this deck. Way too much money. I think it was like... Actually, I'm not even going to say it because it actually kind of makes me self-conscious just thinking about the number of dollars that was spent on a deck that absolutely did nothing. I think I won maybe like 2 or 3 games out of like 20 with my initial deck. And so far, I've played about 6 or 7 games with this deck, and I have won almost every single one of them. It is actually disgusting. This commander is way better than I initially thought, and I'm so happy that I went back to rebuild her. And we're going to walk through some of the key cards and combos in this deck, so that way maybe you can build this commander if you want to. And also, I would just encourage you to give it a try. Even if you're more of a budgetary format, there's some cards I'm going to talk to you about today that you really must include in order to make the deck work the way that you want it to work. But outside of that, the rest is just, it's up to you. If you want to just run all basics, run all basics. If you want to cut some of the fast mana like Soul Ring, cut the Soul Ring, that type of stuff. But let's dive into some of the key cards right now. So I think that it's going to help just to understand what this deck does if we first understand what Karametra does. So let's just read Karametra. So she is a 5-mana Selesnya commander. It's a legendary enchantment creature with indestructible. It's a god, by the way. Super sweet. As long as your devotion to green and white is less than 7, Karametra is not a creature. Devotion meaning the little pips that show up. She has 2 of them, so she counts for 2. You need 5 more in addition to that in order to make her a creature. Whenever you cast a creature spell mind you, you may search your library for a forest or plains card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Why is that even good? Well, I will show you why. It's in the form of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards. You see these right here? Let me see if I can get light on these. These are forests and plains. They are all dual lands, and we have been blessed with some recent additions like Lush Portico, which is the surveil land for Murders of Karlov Manor, for instance. And then we have a bunch of older cards like Radiant Grove, for instance, the classics like Temple Garden, Kaldheim just in the last few years with Arctic Tree Line. We have classic Canopy Vista, and then finally Scattered Groves. These are all valid targets for Karametra, meaning that we get to basically get all of the dual land types out of our deck. They're going to enter tapped anyway, so you might as well just go ahead and grab a dual land with Karametra if you can. And there's a few caveats to that, but we will get to that in a few minutes. But let's get into the main sort of combo that got me excited to build this deck to begin with. And it starts with, maybe you know it, a card called Kodama of the East Tree. Now, this is one of my favorite all-time commander cards. It's just like classic, crazy green spell commander stuff. And Kodama, for those of you who don't know, is 4 green for a 6/6 legendary spirit with reach. Whenever another permanent ETB is under your control, if it was not put onto the battlefield with this ability, meaning, it's some other source that the card entered the battlefield from, you may put a permanent card with equal, that's very important, equal or lesser converted mana cost from your hand onto the battlefield. And for those of you wondering, lands count as 0. So lands are 0 CMC. So if you play a land, for instance, a regular old land off of Kodama's ability, you get to just put another one onto the battlefield. And then of course, if you put something that's like 4 CMC on the battlefield and Kodama's there and sees it, you'll get to put something for 4 or less from your hand onto the battlefield for free, by the way. So this card is nutty already, but I'm going to show you how to absolutely break it. So it's actually pretty simple. It's this sort of suite of cards right here. So it's anything that sort of puts another permanent onto the battlefield. And I believe that I have Rampaging Baloths in here as well. But for our purposes, the main ones that we're going to kind of get out just because they're less mana hungry are Amaria Angel, which makes a 1/1, what is it, a white bird. Tireless Provisioner, which you know him, you love him. He makes a food or a treasure. That one is very important. Tireless Tracker that makes a clue. That one can also be very important. Or Felidar Retreat. And this one is just great in any landfall deck, but it's extra cracked right here. So why do we need to be able to make another token? Well, it's because of these lands right here. I wish there were more of them. I think it's only these two. There might be one other one that I'm missing. If I am, put it down in the comments for me, but I haven't needed it. And that's Selesnya Sanctuary and then Guildless Commons. And so these cards are bounce lands. When you play them, they say enters the battlefield tapped. And then when they enter the battlefield, return a land you control to the owner's hand. So they can also target themselves. And why is that important? If we have Kodama of the East Tree on the battlefield with one of these other cards like a Tireless Provisioner, Tireless Tracker, Felidar Retreat, Amaria Angel, or Rampaging Baloths, or any other card for that matter that makes something when a land enters, this land will enter the battlefield. You're going to get a trigger on any of those cards and Kodama to put something from your hand onto the battlefield. You can put something onto the battlefield with Kodama if you want, like a forest or something. It just makes the combo go a little harder, but you don't need to. So let's just say we don't choose to actually put something onto the battlefield with Kodama, and then we decide to return this to our hand. So we get to take this back to our hand, resolving that trigger, and then we finally resolve whatever trigger it is that's on the battlefield. So if it's Felidar Retreat, we make a cat. If it's Tireless Tracker, we make a clue. Provisioner, we probably make a treasure most of the time. If it's Amaria Angel, we make a bird. If it's the Rampaging Baloths, we make a Baloth, etc. And then when that new creature, or whatever it is, enters the battlefield, Kodama says, hey, wait a second. There's a 0 CMC thing that you just played, so I want you to put something for 0 CMC onto the battlefield from your hand. Guess what's back in our hand? It's our bounce land. So we get to, now you see it, replay this and then just keep going. So we can make infinite cats, infinite Baloths, treasures, clues, food, birds, etc. And this combo, I didn't think it was going to be as potent as it was because it's such an expensive combo to get off, and that's why I felt like it was kind of fair to play in my play group because Kodama is 6 mana, and we also have to have some other prerequisite on the board, like the tracker, the provisioner, etc. So at the lowest end, it's 9 mana comboing. So I thought that was totally fine until I realized most people never see this coming. And if you play it out at a time when everybody's tapped out, for instance, the game pretty much just ends on the spot because you making infinite, let's say, treasures with Tireless Provisioner means that you can then also make infinite food to then sack the food infinitely to gain infinite life. Or, for instance, if we have infinite cats, for instance, with all of them entering the battlefield, we can overrun our opponents immediately thereafter with an effect in our deck like a Finale of Devastation, something like that, or we can Court of Calling out our Craterhoof Behemoth to end the game. It's deadly consistent. Like, I have hit this combo probably 4 of my 6 games that I've won, and the other games that I've won have been a result of just insane value from Karametra. I think that there's an argument to be made about maybe not even playing this Kodama combo in the deck, but like the combo just sort of like hits itself all the time because Karametra is constantly thinning your deck to get you to these things. And I know people meme on deck thinning. They say, oh, it's not real. It is real. Like when you pull out literally 15 lands from your deck because of Karametra's ability. And you draw out a ton of your deck with effects like a Glimpse of Nature or Rite of Harmony, something to that effect. And there's various cards that allow us to keep blinking things back to our hand, like a White Mane Lion, for instance. You immediately have this insane value train that gets off the tracks after just one turn of value. And I will also say Karametra being an enchantment most of the time being on the battlefield means it's a bit easier to hit because most people have creature removal, right? Not a lot of us have enchantment removal at the ready. If I'm playing against a white deck, you bet that they probably have a Swords to Plowshares or a Path to Exile, but it's unlikely for them to have like a Return to Dust, for instance. So I found that this combo is deadly consistent. And even if I don't hit the combo, I have so much value on board, it's almost impossible for people to get over it. And I love this deck, man. It's really good. But let's talk about some other cards and other combos that we can also hit. Can you tell I'm excited about this commander? I mean, I just rambled for that entire time, and I feel like it was pretty cohesive actually, because I feel like this type of strategy is so easy to sort of get behind. It's just sort of mastering the combo initially, because I feel like it's your responsibility to be able to explain this to other players at the table. Like if you just say, well, I have Kodama, my Felidar Retreat, and my Selesnya Sanctuary, I make infinite cats. You need to be able to explain why you can do that, right? And I think that in the same vein, this combo is a little bit easier, but it's good to just understand. So let's just hit it really quick. So it's Amaria Shepherd and then Sakura Tribe Elder. So Sakura Tribe Elder is just a crazy include in this deck to begin with, because you're getting double the land when Karametra is out. You get to just get your land, forest or plains of your choice out of your deck on cast, by the way. Sakura Tribe Elder enters, and then you could go get another land if you so choose. Double the ramp for 2 mana is great. But it's even better when you have this out, Amaria Shepherd. So this card is a 7 mana, 4/4 flying angel with landfall. Whenever a land ETB is under your control, you may return target non-land permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If that land is a plains, you may return that non-land permanent to the battlefield instead. So, interestingly, what ends up happening most of the time is you fetch every plains out of your deck with Sakura Tribe Elder, and then most of the time I have enough mana left over to continuously cast the Sakura Tribe Elder to then fetch out a majority of the other lands in my deck. So the combo basically is you have both of these cards on the battlefield. You sack the Sakura Tribe Elder to its ability. It is now in the graveyard, and then you get your plains, whatever it is, right, out of the yard, and the Sakura Tribe Elder immediately returns to the battlefield for you to sack it again. And then you just get every plains out of your deck. And then you can, of course, get your other lands out of the deck as well. The other forests, that is, from Sakura Tribe Elder's ability. And then you'll have to, quote unquote, unfortunately pay for Sakura Tribe Elder. But most of the time, like I said, this is just such a nutty combo that if it gets back to you on your next turn and you have remotely anything in your hand, the game basically just ends. So I think this is an important one to go over. I haven't really hit it that often like the other one for some reason. I don't know why, but it's another cool little piece, a little tech to the deck. And I think that I would encourage you, if you're going to be running this deck for the first time, to incorporate both of these infinite combos, because again, Sakura Tribe Elder is good on its own. And then the Amaria Shepherd is just sort of this extra assurance that yes, if I do happen to get this and Sakura Tribe Elder in my hand, I get to empty every plains onto the battlefield. So in a similar vein to just like good cards to include in your deck, I have not tried this card until this deck, but I am very much convinced that the new Nissa is just absolutely broken. Let me see. Nissa, there you go. So this is the 3 mana legendary creature that came out in the March of Machine Aftermath, I want to say. It has landfall. Whenever a land ETBs under your control, add 1 mana of any color. By the way, that just keeps happening. So whenever a land enters, you can just make more mana. And you can see that like with one of these other abilities, like if you have a Tireless Tracker out and you can't make mana to crack your clues to draw your deck, this card gets you there, just by the way. But in addition to that, then if it's the second time this ability has resolved this turn, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal an elf or elemental. Put that card into your hand and the rest go on the bottom in a random order. So Nissa is not just great because it just continuously adds mana at 3, but also, it is great because you get to hit another elf. And in this deck, we have all of our dorks, we have our wood elves, that type of thing. So it tends to be just a really good consistency piece because with the mana that you're generating off of your Nissa, you can then cast another one of your elves, which will then trigger Karametra to then get more land out of your deck, which will then cause Nissa to then make more mana to fuel your plays. I'm running out of breath. It's crazy. Like this card in and of itself, I know it's breaking like standard because there's all these combos with multiple Nissas in the deck, fetching out all of your elves quickly. But Nissa in Commander is just as crazy. This card is genuinely really good. I think that it's another one of those cards where if you want to sort of dumb the deck down to not go as hard as fast, you would probably cut Nissa because it's just so strong that when I do happen to get it out, if it doesn't get removed, it just does degenerate things over and over again because you're likely going to be hitting your second landfall almost every turn anyway, as soon as Karametra comes out. Not to mention that Nissa also acts as sort of a quasi ramp to then get your Karametra out next turn, almost guaranteed. So let's say you have 3 lands on turn 3, you play out your Nissa, pass. If the Nissa does not die, the next turn you get to play your next land, generate your mana, and then go ahead and play out Karametra. And then the train is off the tracks immediately after that because Karametra just acts as this crazy value engine for your deck. So again, I think that it's one of those cards that if you want to dumb it down, cut it out. But otherwise, this card is going to do crazy things for you. And it's certainly helped me win games. It's actually won a game for me almost completely by itself because of the mana generation. So really good. Highly recommend it. Let's just talk a sec about some other elements to this, including light stacks pieces and also my removal for the deck. So let's start with some removal in the form of Admonition Angel. Ooh, Admonition Angel, there you go. It is a 6 mana, 3 white angel, 6/6 flyer with landfall, of course. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may exile target non-land permanent other than Admonition Angel. And then whenever it leaves the battlefield, return all lands exiled with it to the battlefield, or all cards, sorry, to the battlefield under their owner's control. So this card is good for a number of reasons. You can imagine like I've hit it one time where basically what ends up happening is you have this infinite combo out with Kodama or whatever, where you're playing multiple lands per turn. And then you basically can exile everything off the board except for lands. And most of the time that's enough to get the job done. It's only happened to me one time, but that resulted in a win for obvious reasons because I just remove everybody's mana acceleration. And most of the time because we are in this Selesnya landfall sort of deck, we are unaffected if we have our artifacts removed, for instance, because we have mana ramped ourselves naturally through our land base instead of an artifact type of ramp. So us having our stuff removed is not nearly as devastating as our opponents having their artifacts and creatures removed. I'm just giving that as the example. The other card that I have in here is a card that has been showing up in more and more of my decks because of how potent it is, and that is Manglehorn. If you know, you know. It is basically just a better Reclamation Sage. The only caveat is it does not sort of synergize with Nissa's ability to then go get an elf because Rec Sage is an elf. Manglehorn does the same thing. It destroys an artifact when it enters the battlefield. I believe Rec Sage hits enchantments too, but this is really good. The second part is what makes it really good. Artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. So say goodbye to all of my friends' infinite treasure combos because now they all enter the battlefield tapped. Or is there some type of mana acceleration you're trying to do, like with playing out your Soul Ring into something else? Manglehorn is going to shut that down either by destroying the Soul Ring or making it enter the battlefield tapped. It does some crazy stuff in pretty much every game that I play it. And I think that if you are having this issue of running into pods that are heavy in artifact synergies, Manglehorn is going to get the job done for you. And in this deck, yes, I do run things like Soul Ring, but remember that second ability is only for your opponent's artifacts. It's not for your artifacts. So it has that added synergy for your own deck, even though we're running limited artifact package here. So that's the meat and potatoes of the deck, but I just want to do a few honorable mentions for the deck. So Tiller Engine and Amulet of Vigor. Ooh, there you go. Both of these cards basically cause your tap lands to enter in an untapped fashion, and that's just crazy. I mean, with Karametra already being good, if we have the ability to fetch a land off of a creature being cast and then immediately have it enter, and it's normally going to enter tap, but instead replacing that, it's going to enter untapped. It's really good. Whenever I have either of these cards out, they immediately sort of become targets for removal, and understandably so, because you get to do some even crazier things with this deck when something like that happens. For instance, if you have, this happened to me one time, a Provisioner out, Tireless Provisioner with Kodama, and you have your bounce land in hand, the bounce land normally enters the battlefield tapped, and you can, in response to the trigger of the bounce land, float the mana, essentially, and then draw with the clues the Provisioner makes at a later time. Once you've finished resolving all of your Kodama stuff, draw your entire deck, play your Crater Hoof or whatever it is that you need, and then the game's over. It's super good. So these two cards in and of themselves, I think, are almost an auto-include in this deck, not just for combo reasons, but also just simply for value. And in addition to that, the Tiller engine also causes you to tap target non-land permanent and opponent controls. So having the added utility of just being able to tap down all of your opponent's stuff is just super good. So yes, include these cards. They're great. And then one more card that I just want to bring up, I think it sort of flew under the radar with the recent release of Murders at Karlov Manor, is Escape Tunnel. So this is basically, arguably, a better Terramorphic Expanse or Evolving Wilds. You can tap it, sack it, search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Exactly the same as a Terramorphic Expanse or an Evolving Wilds, but it has the added benefit of tap, sack it, target creature with power 2 or less cannot be blocked this turn. So I have started to run this over things like Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse just because you get that added sort of utility of having something to be unblockable. I think that this could be even better in like a ninjutsu deck, for instance, or something like that. But in this deck, it's just fine. It hasn't really come into play yet for me, like getting lethal off of this. But I will say that just having the bonus sort of utility is very nice. It's something that I'm not overlooking. Let's just put it that way. And that's really it. I don't have too much more to go into about this deck other than it's insane. It's really quite crazy. If you are at all interested, I did post sort of a text guide to some of this stuff over on my Patreon. And the Patreon is now going to be for paid members who are interested in receiving sort of earlier access to the deck list a day or even sometimes weeks early with sort of a breakdown of the combos of the deck, things that I've cut, cards I've tried that I haven't enjoyed, etc. If you want sort of that more in-depth early access look, my Patreon is your place to get that, and your support really is appreciated over there. Just because, I mean, with these videos, it takes a lot of my time, so having sort of the financial feedback as well is extremely helpful for me to continue making things like this. And I am currently in the process of planning a gameplay series, which there will be more on that later. Again, if you're interested, my patrons will be the ones that are going to first know about that. So if you're interested in learning more as it unfolds, mind you, then I would head over there and subscribe to the Patreon. Otherwise, the other best way to support me is through all of the regular YouTube things, the subscribing, the liking, all that stuff, which you guys kill anyway, so I don't really have to, badger you about that. But what I want you to do this time around is just share the video with one of your friends who needs a little Karametra in their lives. Somebody that likes Selesnya that maybe hasn't done this type of build yet, and watch them steamroll the table for the next year. Actually, maybe don't share it with your friends now that I'm thinking about it. Is this reverse psychology now? Yeah, don't share it with your friends. Definitely don't do that. And guys, I've been Kyle. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for giving me your time on the Friday when you're watching this or otherwise in the future. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you so much. Bye.